What's up, YouTube? Doomwake here. Today we are back with another modern video. As always, if you enjoy the content, be sure to leave a comment in the comment section below, drop a like in the video, and consider subscribing to the channel. Today we are going to be playing something a little different. Now, as I'm sure many of you may know, regular watchers of the channel, or if you're just new to the channel, I am a big proponent of Death Shadow in the modern format. Typically, in the past, I've been a big fan of Rakdos, Death Shadow, and as of recently, I've been pretty high on Jund. Now, the reason that I am so really high on those decks is the card Lurrus of the Dream Den. So if we go to, let me just see if I can pull it up here. Just to give you an idea, this is the Jund Shadow list where I'm at right now. This is not what we're going to be playing today, obviously, but so when Scourge of the Skyclaves got printed, it's not letting me expand it. But when this card got printed, the Death Shadow decks, just to kind of give you a little history lesson. So prior to Scourge of the Skyclaves being printed, Death Shadow was largely a Grixis deck. It played, maxed out copies of Stubborn Denial, Fatal Push, Lightning Bolt. It was essentially just, a bunch of interaction for Death Shadow, Gurmag Angler, Street Wraith, stuff like that, right? The reason it played Gurmag Angler is because it just wanted, it was essentially, I hate the use of the word tempo, but it was in essence a tempo deck where it would just control the pace of the game using removal spells and discard spells, play a large threat, protect it with Stubborn Denial, attack a couple of times. Now, the texture of the deck changed when Scourge of the Skyclave was printed, because this card is very, very good. Obviously, you need to control your own life total with it, because if you're not damaging yourself, then you can't realistically play an early Scourge that's an actual threat. So you need to be able to damage your opponent consistently, or you need to damage yourself consistently, as well as damage your opponent consistently, because you can do as much damage to yourself, but that doesn't matter if your opponent's still at 20 life. If they just play a couple of basic lands, or a fast land, and they don't fetch in the early turns, they don't allow you to cast Scourge of the Skyclaves. Now, a lot of decks in Modern do play Shocklands and Fetch lands, but in the games where your opponent is not dealing themselves damage, you need a way to reliably deal your opponent damage in the early turns to be able to turn on Scourge of the Skyclaves and be able to cast it reliably, right? So when Scourge got printed, everybody thought, okay, well, this card's good, but we need a way to essentially enable it. And that's where people started playing one-drops, Monastery Swiftspear, Bomat Courier. I've seen, Hex Drinkers, Grim Lavamancers, Soulscar Mages. There's been a variety of one-drops, and the idea is you play a one-drop on turn 1, attack your opponent on turn 2, now you're guaranteed to play a Scourge. So it kind of changed the texture from the old Grixis decks, who, again, used to be just this, I don't want to say a control deck, because they're not really a control deck, but they had a lot of removal and discard and had very minimal threats. Now, when Scourge got printed again, that changed, and they had to kind of change their game plan and mold it around Scourge. But as you can see here, most of it has been previous versions with Rakdos, with Bomat Courier, Jund versions now with Tarmogoyf, but they all share the same distinct difference between Jund or Grixis Shadow of old, whereas they need one-drops to be able to turn on Scourge, right? And a lot of people on my Twitch channel, which, by the way, I will put a link in the description below if you want to go follow me on Twitch. A lot of people have asked me on my Twitch channel as I've been streaming recently, why don't you like Grixis anymore? Is there a particular reason? And I just continuously tell them, you need to be able to play Lurrus of the Dream Den. You can't play Gurmag, you can't play Street Wraith. If you're playing a Death Shadow deck, you need to play Lurrus in order to compete with the other control decks, the other mid-range decks, the other Death Shadow decks, because if you're playing a Death Shadow deck without Lurrus and you play against the Death Shadow deck with Lurrus, you're at such a huge disadvantage that it's almost just not worth it, right? So I kept telling, a lot of people who asked me that question, you need to find a way to get Lurrus into the Grixis deck. And I don't really think up until this past weekend a lot of people had considered Delver of Secrets as the one drop that the deck was missing. However, this particular deck list, I don't recall the name of the individual who played it, but this particular deck list actually won the entire thing, the Modern Challenge this past weekend. And as you can see, there's the one drop that we've been missing, Delver of Secrets. Now, Delver of Secrets in modern compared to older formats like Legacy, where you have access to Brainstorm and Ponder. Obviously, Delver of Secrets is not as potent as it could be in those older formats. However, the same theory still applies, especially with something like Monastery of Swiftspear. And obviously, the Delver doesn't have haste, so you're not attacking on turn 1. But if your theory is just play a 1-drop, attack on turn 2, now you can play a Scourge, Delver fulfills that role just fine, even if it's only attacking for 1 on turn 2. The upside of playing Delver is, obviously, if you flip a spell on, if you play a Delver on turn 1 and flip it, you can almost just run away with the game right there. So it does a lot of what Swiftspear was doing, but it also is just much higher upside. The ceiling is a lot higher on Delver of Secrets. So I'm really interested to see how this plays out. Again, the rest of the usual suspects are there: Thoughtseize, Lightning Bolt, Inquisition, Fatal Push, Shadow, Scourge, Dismember, Temur, Battle Rage. The blue complement allows us to play Stubborn Denial, which is a very, very potent card, especially in combination with Death Shadow and Scourge of the Skyclaves. Again, cantrips, Serum Visions, the aforementioned Delver of Secrets, and then Drown in the Loch, which I'm not a huge fan of Drown in the Loch if you're not going to play Thought Scour, because you can Thought Scour your opponent and turn Drown in the Loch on a lot more efficiently. So we'll go ahead and see hopefully get to see how these Drowns play out, because I'm not 100% sold on them. I wonder if they would just be better suited as either more copies of Serum Visions, maybe main deck Kolaghan's Commands, something along those lines. But as always, we are a Lurrus deck, so we can't play any permanents that cost 3 or more mana. So all of our creatures are 2 or less. We get some spells that cost 3, but those are acceptable. This is 18 lands. This doesn't look like a land, but it is. Aghanim's Awakening. I had one of these for the longest time. I had one of these in Rakdos Shadow, and I cut it, and I can't remember the reason why, but I'm interested to see how it plays out. The nice thing about Aghanim's Awakening here is the first copy. Obviously, it's an additional land that allows you to pay 3 life, which can help with your Death Shadows, but it's also a land that conveniently flips Delver of Secrets. So I'm interested in potentially want to see if the mana base can support maybe a second copy of this. I'm not certain that it can, but it is very interesting, especially if you're playing Delver of Secrets. That's something to keep in mind. And then the other thing that blue allows us to do is get access to some really potent sideboard cards, specifically Disdainful Stroke and Aether Gust. One of the weaker matchups for specifically Jund Shadow is Green Tron. Disdainful Stroke is a very, very good card against Tron, as is Stubborn Denial. We get an extra copy of that in the sideboard. And then we get Aether Gust for Primeval Titan decks, which I think Jund has an okay matchup against Primeval Titan, but it's not the best matchup in the world. Obviously, Aether Gust is insane against Primeval Titan. And then we get some additional Mystical Dispute for the control decks. We get like this, as you've seen in the Jund Shadow decks before, the grindy package, which is some Kolaghan's Command and a Kroxa. Here we have some Kolaghan's Command and a Snapcaster Mage instead of a Kroxa. I think the theory behind not playing Kroxa is this player really wanted to play Basic Island, which makes sense. Having access to Basic Island when you have Stubborn Denial and Delver of Secrets, if you're playing against Burn, could come up a decent amount of the time. We have a Kozilek's Return for the Heliod matchup. We have a Brutality for Burn and control decks. We have some Spell Bumps for Graveyard Hate, and Explosives for the Shadow Mirror. So yeah, a really interesting take on the Death Shadow archetype. Something that I've been kind of looking for. I've really been interested because I've always wanted to play Stubborn Denial, but it's just this is like the missing piece to the puzzle, it feels like. This is one thing that I don't think a lot of people have really thought about previously. So I'm really interested to see how this works out. So yeah, I'll see you in a little bit for round number 1.